Okay, I think we've got everything set up here and we are connected. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good all of those things, and hello to you who is lined up already. Let's see, Nancy and hello, and Jared, hello, Jerry, hello, SD Henderson, hello, David, Kelly, Aubrey, ooh, that's a new name, I think, Becca, Tash from her bed in Bendigo. All right, Mike. And Bendigo is cold and windy, Tash says. How's the weather with you? Well, it's the opposite time of the year, obviously, in California, but where we are in California, it's not super hot because we're near the ocean. So it's, probably about 60 degrees outside right at the moment because the sun is going down or starting to. And there's Jeremy. Hi, Jeremy. Um, yeah, I mean, I just closed the screens actually in the office here because it was getting a little bit cool. So, anyway, hello, greetings to all of you. Nice to have you with me. We will be reading more Tailchaser song from the Command and Control Pod Cockpit, whatever the hell. Anyway, no, it's just my desk and it's just where I'm sitting here. It's a very old desk at this point, too. I was just thinking about that the other day. When we moved here 9 years ago or so, I could barely put my desk back together. It's like this complicated IKEA thing. But we had lost about half the hardware during the course of the move. So as a result, there are parts of it that are kind of just banged together with various things and coat hanger wires and stuff. And I'm still using it. So one thing that no one can say about me is that I am one of those people who throws things out immediately and just goes and gets a new one. Because believe me, this desk is thunderously crap, and yet I'm still using it, and probably will until it actually falls on top of me. Anyway, that doesn't matter. My laptop's getting old too, so as you can probably tell by the quality of the camera and the quality of the sound, I guess if I'm going to keep doing this, I'm going to have to start thinking about getting a proper webcam and all that other kind of stuff. Let's see who else checked in. Emily and Cliff. Oh, and somebody just got their first official desk, SD. Good. I'd love to get a more official desk. This one, I guess it's official. I mean, I've written about 10 books on it, but in terms of its ease of use and things like that, it's pretty horrifying. But whatever. I'll deal with it when I deal with it. I've only got a list of things that have to be done that's about 400 items long, and I just keep adding more things to the bottom, and every now and then I knock off something near the top. So, that's how it works. And that's what I'm doing now, too. Here, let me move that up a little bit. And tonight, do I have anything interesting to report? Well, one of our friends who was evacuated for the fire just got devacuated, I guess is the term, and has returned, and we heard from her. And she says the house is fine, but that everything smells a bit smoky, which is, pretty much of a win-win in a situation like that, when you're running out the door not knowing what's going on and just grabbing things that you can fit into your car with a few short minutes to evacuate. So the fact that nothing worse than a bit of smoke smell is good news. That is good news. That is a win. So that sounds as though the fire has been brought much more under control here. I haven't actually looked it up lately because it was pretty clear several days ago that it wasn't going to threaten us personally where we are. And in the midst of everything else going on in life and all of its joy and complexity, I haven't been checking on the containment of the fire there, but I'm glad to hear that some of our friends are getting back to their homes okay. And yeah, so that's the update on that bit of local interest here. Otherwise, it's been what it's been. It's been just hanging out, doing the thing, doing the pandemic thing. For those of you who want to know, yes, the young people in the household did get it together after I reminded them one last time after I got off the air here at like 3:40 in the morning. I said, by the way, those dishes are going to be done, right? I'm not going to have some kind of major conniption fit. And they all went, "Oh, is it that late?" I'm going like, "It's almost 4 in the morning, kids. I know you're on pandemic time, but come on." Anyway, but like I said, like I always say, they're good people. They're good people. And you are all good people too, I'm sure. I can just tell. I can feel your vibe coming up off the laptop here as I'm watching you all add things on. Here, Cliff has popped up, and Jim, and Emily, who has recently read a line that amused her and still can't stop chuckling. But what line is that? Oh, it must be The Dirty Streets of Heaven, of course. Yeah, I have so many books now that I can't even tell my own abbreviations. So TDSOH, yeah, Dirty Streets of Heaven. Anyway, so thank you for that, Emily. I appreciate it. What else? Anything else? Nah, can't think of anything. I just spent the day working, watching baseball, which is an age-old habit of mine going back to childhood. One of the great things about being a baseball fan, and this is for those of you not in the country and not having grown up with the game, baseball is basically, not this year because it's really weird because of coronavirus, but generally baseball is on all the time, to the point where they play 162 games, and that's before the playoffs and the World Series and all that even start. So if you were an American kid who liked baseball, it was just on all the time from April until October. And it was just a constant part of my life. And although I can live without it, much as I love it, I can live without it, and did for several months. It's a very kind of reassuring thing, even though it's weirder than hell with the empty stadiums and the cardboard fans that they're using now. But it's still kind of reassuring. It's like if you grew up next to a freeway, the sound of freeway cars at night is a reassuring thing. And if you grew up like I did with baseball on your radio all the time, on the television later on, then having baseball around is a little bit of a reassuring thing too. So that's what I spent my day doing, was working and watching baseball. And my team even won. So I just could not be happier. Well, I could be happier, obviously. There's a lot of reasons I could be happier, but I'm in a reasonably good mood, and I hope you guys are too. Of course, all of the hideous problems that we face are still facing us, so don't get me wrong. But you also have to find little moments in which the sun comes down through the clouds, and you find things that you can still enjoy even in the midst of riots and fascism and epidemics, all that stuff. So my solution is to read to you. That is my solution. And I am continuing to read from my extremely old book, Tailchaser Song. Here, it doesn't do any good to just show you my name. Tailchaser Song, with this brilliant cover by Bralds, who is a Danish artist who, among other things, does lots of cats. And in fact, his cats, there's one of the bad cats. Bad cat. Bralds has done a lot of wonderful stuff, but he actually did a whole campaign of cats for, I think, a non-smoking campaign of some kind. And I suspect that was because everybody was so impressed by his Tailchaser Song cover, which really is beautiful. And my publishers in America have never even thought about putting another cover on the paperback. The hardcover was nice too, but the paperback is particularly striking, and people have been telling me that for more years than I can remember now. So that's what I'm reading from, Tailchaser Song, tonight. I left you guys off in the middle of a chapter. Let me get rid of the glasses. I left you guys in the middle of a chapter because I had started in the middle of a chapter. I'll try to do better tonight. But anyway, so what was going on was Fritty, Tailchaser, and Pouncequick, his small friend, and Eatbugs, the crazy cat, are all trapped in the Mound, Vasnir Mound, which is the horrible underground fortressy thing of Grizraz Hearteater, the evil cat god, I guess, for lack of a better term. And they have one other companion, Roof Shadow, who is a female cat, a Fela, as they say in cat language. And she came back for them but Pretty Tailchaser and was being kept separately from his friends Pouncequick and Eatbugs, and so Roof Shadow was only able to save him. And they're doing their best to escape, to go give people news about what is happening in this terrible place. And just as they are making their way back to the as they're making their way back to the place where Roof Shadow dug in. Well, I'll just read the last paragraph. He had bounded ahead of Roof Shadow, who reared suddenly, crying, "Tailchaser, something is foul here!" Then one of the black shapes between them rose up, and with that movement the air was suddenly full of a sickly, spicy odor. Roof Shadow squeaked, a strange throttled noise, and Pretty stumbled to a halt. Both cats stood as though paralyzed. A dry voice, like the sound of branches rubbing together, issued from the dark shape. "You shall not pass," it said. The words were faint, as if spoken from a great distance away. "You are the Bone Guards now." "No!" boomed a new voice. Unbelieving, frozen with an odd, exalted terror, Tailchaser saw the sunken eyes and malformed face of the claw-guard Scratchnail suddenly appear out of the darkness behind Roof Shadow. The gray Phala, overwhelmed, sagged in place and lowered her head. "I took them from his blood and his tooth guard. These two are mine," Scratchnail growled, but moved no closer. "You have no claim," whispered the odd, sighing voice. "No one may interfere with Bast Imret. I do the bidding of the Lord of all." The Bone Guard moved, swaying slightly with a leathery, folding noise, and the Claw Guard chieftain quailed, reeling as if he had been struck. "Take the Phala, if you wish," continued Bast Imret. "Our business is with the other. Go now. You tread in deep places." Scratchnail, whimpering with some unseen injury, leaped forward and grabbed the unresisting Roof Shadow by the nape of the neck, then turned and disappeared down the dark, cluttered tunnel. Pretty tried to call out after Roof Shadow, but could not. His joints tingled with the effort as he tried to pull away and run. The dark form of Bast Imret turned, cat-shaped, but sunken in clinging darkness, even while facing the glow at Tailchaser's back. Pretty could not look at its face, at the dark spots that should have been eyes. Head averted, he struggled, and for a moment succeeded. His legs felt like water, but he managed to turn around and crawl agonizingly away from the Bone Guard. "There is no escape," whispered the wind. "No," thought Freddy, "it isn't the wind. Run, you fool!" "No escape," breathed the wind, and he could feel himself weakening. "Not the wind. Must escape, Come with me now." It was not the wind. He knew that. He continued crawling. "I will take you to the house of the Bone Guard," droned the unfeeling tones of Bast Imret in the darkness behind him. "The pipes play always in the darkness, and the faceless, nameless ones sing in the deep places. There is no escape. My brothers await us. Come." Freddy could hardly breathe. The smell of dust, spices, and earth dizzied him, permeated him. "We dance in darkness," chanted Bast Imret, and Freddy felt his muscles stiffening. "We dance in darkness, and we listen to the music of silence. Our house is deep and quiet. The earth is our bed." The light seemed brighter. Tailchaser had nearly managed to reach the bend in the tunnel. He blinked his eyes, dazed. Without warning, the dark figure of Bast Imret was before him, blocking the end of the hallway. A dry, Poisonous air seemed to blow out from the bone god. Choking, Tailchaser sagged to the floor, unable even to crawl. The creature stood over him, far-away voice crooning unfamiliar speech. Terror surged through him, hot panic, and somewhere he found the strength to lunge forward. As he struck, he felt the dusty fur give against his momentum. Bast Imret crumpled with a sound like snapping twigs, clutching at Fritty as he tried with what seemed his last dying strength to push past. Beyond the tunnel's edge lay a pool of light. He strained toward it and the freedom it represented. But the bone guard clung, and in the darkness the choking dust and sweet smell enwrapped the two of them like another shadow. Fritty felt the paws of the bone guard, brittle but strong as tree roots splitting rock, curl about his neck. The flaking, dry snout quested for his throat. With a final squeal of revulsion, Tailchaser lashed out. There was a hideous tearing sound as he pulled away from the creature. Great flayed rags of crumbling fur and skin came off in his claws and teeth, and as he tumbled toward the light, he could see the dull wink of old brown bones and the grinning skull of Bast Imret. As he scrambled up the short shaft, he felt a searing pain. The space between his eyes throbbed and burned. When he reached the hovering gray-blue disk of sky, he turned for a moment and saw the terrible thing behind him. It was standing in the shadows of the tunnel's base, its skeletal mouth slowly opening and shutting. "I will remember you until the stars die," said the distant, toneless voice. The fire in Fritty's head flared again, then was gone. Tailchaser forced himself over the edge of the hole. The light outside was so bright that spots floated before his eyes. Hobbling, almost falling forward, he struggled away from the hole, away from Vastnir. The world was white. Everything was white. Then everything was black. Part 3, Chapter 24. O magic sleep, O comfortable bird, that broodest over the troubled sea of the mind till it is hushed and smooth. John Keats. Pain and weariness battled beneath Tailchaser's fur. High in the sky hung the cold, burning stone of the sun. The world was shrouded in snow, trees, stones, and earth mantled in an even white sheath. Little needles of chill pain pricked Fritty's feet as he stumbled through Ratleaf Forest. Since recovering consciousness, he had staggered, near blindly, putting distance between himself and the mound. He knew he had to find shelter before unfolding dark, when the gruesome shapes would come up from the tunnels below, hunting him. The snow behind him was dotted with red. Late afternoon found Fritty still in helpless, unthinking flight. He was weakening rapidly. He had not had anything to eat since what must have been the morning of the previous day. That had been, as was usual for the tunnel slaves, barely sustaining. Tailchaser had now penetrated into deep forest. Columns of trees pillared the forest roof. The ground everywhere was shrouded in ice. Fatigue and glare made his eyes burn, and from time to time he imagined he saw movement. He would stop, hunker down on the cold snow blanket with pounding heart, but there would be nothing. Nothing. A static world. The life of the old forest, now driven out by the foulness growing near it, or so it seemed, Ratleaf made no sound, but silently heard the crisping of his pads, made no movement, but motionlessly observed his struggle. As the day wound forward, and the biting soreness in his nose, ears, and paws disappeared, to be replaced by a puzzling blankness of sensation. The illusion of subtle movement would not be laid to rest. From the corner of an eye, Freddy glimpsed scuttling, shadowy presences, but when he turned his head, only snow-laden trees met his gaze. He was beginning to wonder if he was not indeed mad, as shadow-haunted as old eat-bugs, when one of his sudden glances caught the gleam of an eye. It was gone immediately behind the tree branches that had framed it, but it had been an eye. He was sure of it. When another minute peripheral movement caught his attention, he did not turn, but staggered on, watching with a sort of half-deranged slyness. In the extremity of his weariness, he did not even consider the possibility that it might be a stalking enemy. Like a kitten playing with a dangling vine, first coy and uninterested, the next moment leaping for the kill, he could only think of the moving object, catching it, putting an end to the game. Head down, the crimson drops staining the snow more irregularly now, Fritty saw a brief flash of something dark and swift in the trees to his right. Seemingly unaware, he pitched the uneven progress of his march slightly to that side until he was a jump or so from the edge of the copse. Another flicker of activity just ahead. He had to restrain himself from springing. Carefully now. Carefully. He stopped for a moment. He crouched down and licked one of his bleeding paws all the time, tensing his muscles, ignoring the twinges of pain, waiting for another movement. There! Leaping, half-tumbling, Freddy crashed through the underbrush, paws flailing. Something had been knocked from the low-hanging branches and was scurrying before him. With a surge of strength, he sprang. As his paws made contact, he cracked headfirst into a tree trunk and rolled, stunned, onto his side, something small and warm struggling beneath him. Holding whatever it was, down with a forepaw, he rose and shook his head. He did not feel injured, he thought. Not hurt, but tired, so very tired. For the first time, he looked blurrily down on his prey. It was a squirrel, its eyes bulging in terror, lips drawn away from long, flat teeth. Rick-chick, he thought to himself. Something about the rick-chick. Are they bad to eat? Poisonous? He felt as if his head were buried in snow. Why so cold? Why can't I think? Squirrels. Something I should say to this one. He thought hard. Every idea seemed another difficult step to be taken. Looking down at the small body and trembling, brushy tail, he felt a glimmer of memory. He lifted his paw from the Rick-chick-chick, who lay motionless, staring up at him with panic-bright eyes. Rick. Rick. Freddy tried to remember the sounds. He knew he must say it. Murrick. It was no use. He felt a great soft burden settling on his back, buckling his legs. Help me, he choked in the common singing. Help me. Lord Snap said to tell you, Rick. Tailchaser collapsed to the snow beside the startled squirrel.
Now, you cat, you speak pretty. Why say brother name Lord Snap?
Above Tailchaser's head, clinging upside down to the trunk of a tree, was a chubby old squirrel with a bent tail and glittering eyes. Behind him, showing less courage, a phalanx of Rick-chick-chick peered down the trunk and between leaves at Freddy.
Talk now, talk, squeaked the squirrel leader. How no Lord Snap? Tell.
You say Lord Snap is your brother? asked Tailchaser, trying to clear the cobwebs from his mind.
Most certain, yes, chittered the squirrel a trifle disgustedly. Snap is brother of Pop. Lord Pop is I. You see so, silly cat?
Feeling addled, Fritty reflected on this a moment. I was supposed to say something to you, Lord Pop. I mean, Lord Snap, your brother, told me to say... How did it go? Lord Pop made an impatient clicking noise. I'll try to say it, Fritty muttered. No, that's not it. Meow. Hurrah, I can't remember it. Tailchaser noticed that Lord Pop's retinue seemed to have lost much of their fear of him and were, in fact, squealing with amusement. Tailchaser was sore and confused and tired, and for a moment his mind wandered. Then, suddenly, Dewclaws! I've got it! Fritty laughed, a painful sound. Marick-a-reck snap! Marick-a-reck... Marick-a-reck-rick... Marick-a-rick-a-reck snap! That's right, isn't it? In his moment of exultation, he felt suddenly lightheaded and sagged where he stood. Lord Pop leaned forward and fixed him with an agate eye.
Is right. Sacred oak, pledge of Snap. We honor. Strange times. You can walk, so strange cat.
Limping, Tailchaser followed the Rick-Chick-Chick party into the deep groves of inner Ratleaf. Trudging behind the chattering, hurrying squirrels, Fritty absently noticed the red glare of the setting sun. Something rustled in the back of his mind, tried to make him pay heed to the gathering darkness, but his head hurt. It was too hard to think. The rising steam of his breath caught his attention. He crunched on through the snow behind the bustling Rick-Chick-Chick. The group halted. Tailchaser stood dazedly by until Lord Pop and two other Rick-Chick-Chick descended from the trees to stand beside him. Looking down on their arched tails and round backs, he smiled benevolently and said, I've been in the mound, you know. The Squirrel Lord's companions drew back at this, chittering, but Lord Pop stood his ground, bright eyes thoughtful. He soundlessly signaled the others back. Together, they coaxed Tailchaser into a hollow, lightning-blasted stump. The inside was sheltered, free of snow. After making 3 stumbling automatic turns for the firstborn, Fritty collapsed to the ground. A bevy of Rick-Chick-Chick brought pine needles and bark, covering him from nose to tail tip.
We talk, son, next. So, strange cat, said Pop. Now you make sleep, yes?
But Tailchaser had already slipped across the border into the dream fields. That night, a darkness alive with searching shapes swirled harmlessly past, leaving Fritty's sleeping place undiscovered and safe. In the depths of dream, Tailchaser stood on the edge of a vast plain of water, tempest-stirred but silent. The broad, shiny surface stretched as far as he could see, and the shapes of fluffaz wheeled and dove in the gray sky. When he finally awoke, the short winter day was already half over. By the end of Smaller Shadows, he found himself once more facing Lord Pop, who, with his court, had returned to Tailchaser's hollow tree. In his imperious stutter, the Squirrel Lord indicated that they had waited a long while for their cat guest to rise, and had eventually given up and gone out to forage. Tailchaser, feeling infinitely better for the long sleep, was only now discovering how many different parts of his body ached and throbbed. He was also ravenously hungry. The Rick-Chick-Chick may have sensed this, for even Pop showed more restraint than he had the previous day. For his part, Tailchaser fervently wished that he could slip off and do some hunting, but in view of the precarious alliance with the Rick-Chick-Chick, his natural prey, he decided it would be better to wait until he could creep off unobtrusively. So, stomach grumbling, he sat and listened patiently to Lord Pop's long summation of the morning's activities.
So, now is the time for true talk, yes? Chirped the portly squirrel lord. Why, here, so sudden, cat. Why, talk, bad place.
Fritty tried his best to explain the occurrences that had brought him finally to Ratleaf Forest. It was necessarily a long tale and took a good part of the fading afternoon. When he told of his rescue of Mistress Whir and his subsequent audience with Lord Snap, the listeners responded with shrill noises of approval. The Rick-Chick-Chick were then nervously fascinated as he described the swarming cat metropolis of First Home. When he finally told of Vasnir and his awful internment there, several of the young females became quite dizzy and had to be fanned with the bushy tails of their companions. Lord Pop listened in grim quiet, interrupting only for clarification of certain points about the mound and its denizens. And then I found you, or you found me, rather, finished Tailchaser. Lord Pop nodded his head. What I don't really understand, added Fritty, is why you are all still here. I thought everyone had left Ratleaf. He looked inquiringly at the squirrel leader.
Many Rick-Chick-Chick leave, many gone, replied the lord. But Pop, no leave. Can't. Nest to tribe since rooting ground. Few small stay. Live or die.
Fritty nodded understandingly, and for a moment the unusual gathering was silent. A brief and surprising foretaste of mortality, borne on the chill breeze, touched Fritty. He remembered his need. I have a favor to ask of you, Lord Pop, he said.
Ask?
I have a message to get to First Home, to the lords of my folk. It must get there soon. I could not travel quickly enough myself. I am still very weak.
Rick-Chick-Chick will do, said Lord Pop without hesitation. We take word. Send Master Plink, so fast like nutfall.
A young Rick-Chick-Chick sat up on his haunches, visibly swelling with importance. He looks very capable, said Tailchaser approvingly. But he should not go alone. The message is important, and it is a long, dangerous journey to Rootwood. Also, Tailchaser tried to speak as delicately as he could. Also, the cats of First Home are not as acquainted as I am with the bravery and goodness of you, Rick-Chick-Chick. They are liable to have a misunderstanding. To send a large party would be preferable. As the import of Tailchaser's words sank in, Master Plink was seen to deflate, and 2 or 3 of the younger females threatened to become faint again. Lord Pop, however, took it in stride.
Marvelous acorn. No worry, cat friend. Many Rick-Chick-Chick go soon. Plink will be small, lord.
He chittered briefly at the young male, who looked somewhat reassured. Fritty gave them the message to be carried, repeating it several times until Plink and the other young bucks had memorized it. And remember, he said seriously, if Prince Fencewalker isn't there, it must be given to Queen Sunback herself. The assemblage made little whistling noises of awe, and Pop signaled an end to the conclave. Fritty's hunting was not tremendously profitable. He caught enough bugs and grubs to take the edge off his hunger, and before bedding down was even persuaded by the now comradely Master Plink to try a chestnut. Even with the Rick-Chick-Chick's help at removing the nut meat from its confounding shell, he did not find it a very satisfying experience. Though he thanked Plink effusively, he secretly decided he would not make a very good squirrel. Winter vented its fury on Ratleaf Forest. Flurrying snowstorms and gale winds drove Lord Pop's small retinue back into their nests. The messengers had left with a great deal of ceremony, and with their departure, Tailchaser sank into lethargy. His one pressing need fulfilled, first home now to be alerted, he found himself succumbing finally to the effects of his harrowing time underground. Contact with the Rikchik became less frequent. Fritty spent more and more time hunkered down in his tree stump nest, sheltering and recuperating. Hunting was sparse, so he conserved his energy, spending long stretches of time in slumber, the waking hours brief and barely distinguishable from the sleeping. Curled in his lightning-blasted tree, tail curved protectively over his nose, he let his mind wander over the things he had done and seen. As if they were present with him, he summoned up his friends from Meeting-Wall, Thinbone, Fleetpaw, the aloof Stretch-Slow, and kind Bristlejaw. How they would marvel if they could see him. Sometimes he thought of Hushpad, the grace of her walk and the soft contours of her neck and head. He would pretend that he had found her and taken her back home, that she listened in awe and respect as he described his adventures. "For me?" she would say. "All of that to find me?" Then the wind would whistle down the stump and ruffle his fur, and once more he would be back in Ratleaf. He would think of those he had left behind, left to awful destinies in the mound. "I suppose that is why I was named Tailchaser," he thought sourly to himself. "All I have done is follow the closest thing, led on like a kitten chasing its tail, moving in circles until it exhausts itself." One day, nearly half an eye since he had been found by the Rikchik, Fritty was walking back to his nest after a long afternoon of unsuccessful hunting. Not all the life of Ratleaf had been driven out, but most of the creatures that remained were hidden for the long, cold winter. Tailchaser was feeling empty and purposeless. He stopped to drag his claws down the bark of a standing pine tree, relieving a little frustration and sending a shower of powdery snow down from the branches above. He felt a sudden revelation. His time in Ratleaf was over. The vast empty forest, snowbound and silent, was a way station, a neutral area. Like the half-sleep between dreaming and waking, it was a place not to remain, but to gather energy, to move one direction or the other. That moment, as he stood with back arched and whiskers washed by the cold air, he remembered the words of one of the elders at his naming. He desires his tail name before he has even received his face name. They had laughed, but now he realized there was truth there. He had set out not just to find Hushpad, but to gain something. He had been led, true, but he had chosen to follow. Now he must turn one way or the other. He could return the way he had come, leaving it to Fence Walker and the others to succeed or fail, or he could complete his journey. Not that he, with his own small paws, could make any large difference, but he could finish his journey. His friends were trapped, helpless. He could not save them, perhaps, but they had come with him, and they all belonged together. For a moment, just a moment, he thought he could understand what it was like to finally hear one's inner voice, to learn one's tail name. The fur on his back bristled, and he had a fit of uncontrollable shivering. He dropped back down to his paws and turned back to his nest. It was not until he had curled himself up for sleep that he realized he was truly going back to the mound. Chapter 25. The lions pass a thorn bush and melt. Though the whole day is unbroken, the passage of the sun will represent heaven. The bones will represent time. Josephine Jacobson. Dawn found Tailchaser moving toward the vanward border of Ratleaf. He had not gone to say farewells to the Rick-Chick-Chick. Despite Lord Pop's honor-bound discharge of Snap's debt, Fritty did not feel he could comfortably involve the squirrels any further. They were already struggling for their own survival. Chance and strange times had made them allies, but Tailchaser knew that the Rick-Chick-Chick and the folk were prey and hunter, and would be those things always. He only hoped that the artificial alliance would hold until his message was safely delivered to the folk of the Queen's seat. As he paced silently through the tree-crowded snowscape, he thought of First Home and his time there, a half-hearted attempt to keep his mind occupied. The mound would be before him soon enough. There was no reason to hasten his thoughts ahead. Among the thinned tree rows and bracken near the outer edge of the great forest, Fritty heard a sound from above, the rustling of wings. He momentarily considered darting for shelter, but before he could spring from the open white space in which he was framed, two black shapes dropped from the heights above. Prepared, he hoped, for whatever ill fortune had descended on him, he crouched, hackles raised. The two dark creatures settled on a branch above, with a flurry of ebony pinions. Fritty relaxed, somewhat. It was only a pair of ravens, Krautke, one large and one small. Not the most harmless of fluffbas, but still not strong enough to match talons with the folk. Still, he regarded them suspiciously, as they, in turn, stared down at him with glittering eyes. "Got the Tailchaser?" asked the older bird in an unmusical voice. "Course, Dad, there'd be star on's head now. See?" squeaked the smaller. Tailchaser took a step backward in surprise. "You can speak," he breathed. "You know the common singing?" With a harsh cackle of amusement, the larger Krautke flapped his wings, lifting slightly off the branch. Settling down, he preened his chest feathers in a self-satisfied manner, keeping an eye on Fritty. "There be many who bear no fur, yet speak nigh better than cats." The large bird chuckled again. "Those would be long-living, like we. Well, they do learn. Why, even my eldest here," he indicated the smaller raven, "thou's got no more sense nor a tumblebug." "Well," said Fritty after a moment's consideration, I suppose I should by rights be beyond surprise by now. How do you know my name?" "Those what gossip with squirrels should not wonder that the trees know all they secrets. There be little adrift in this forest what doesn't blow past the ears of old Scuggy, which is me." "My old dad be's chief croaker in these woods," piped the small bird proudly. "And my young Crelly here's not got the brains what the big black bird give to a mushroom." Scoggy leaned over and pecked the top of his son's head. Crelly cawed piteously and scuttled up the branch out of reach of the paternal beak. "Next time, do you think afore opening your dinner hole," said Scoggy. "And don't be sharing our business with every marmot what gives you the time of day." Fritty was amused in spite of himself. "But you seem to know my business," he pointed out. "Like I said 4 times," chuckled the raven, "Rick-Chick-Chick is a powerful talky lot. Keep they nuts, but no secrets. It be common knowledge, like, that you come from," he indicated with his shiny black head, "from there. The mound, as 'twere. You be well known mongst those what hasn't fled the rat leaf, though that be proper for you now. Where be you going now, Master Tailchaser?" Although the Krautke seemed harmless, Fritty decided on caution. After a moment he said, "Oh, actually, I'm just exploring the forest. As a matter of fact, I should probably be on my way." "Ah, belike," rasped Scoggy. He walked a little way down the branch, ruffling his pitchy feathers, then stopped and peered shrewdly at Fritty from the corner of a glinting eye. "Did it not be so obvious that you were a cat of great smartness like, with a sharp eye toward preserving that fine furry skin you be wearing? When, were it not for this, it would seem like you were a wandering toward that mound yonder? Fela's whiskers, Freddy cursed to himself. Krauka was a clever one. But, countered Tailchaser, as you point out, why would I want to go near that terrible place again? True enough, 'tis a terrible place, 'tis. Evil things what care not where they bite come crawling up. It looks a dark and terrible place, deed it do. The forest be fair empty now. The things what it harbors be so foul. 'Tis all a poor soul can do to protect his family and put a morsel or two in they sweet young beaks. He looked over to Crelly with poorly mimed affection. Then why do you stay? Asked Freddy. Ah, well now, croaked Skoggy with a sigh betokening great sorrow. This be the only home ever we knowed. It would be powerful hard to leave behind the nesting spots of nigh on 1,000 generation. Course, and here he laughed creakily, it has been might easier keeping the little darlings fed of late. Those creatures what lives below ground may be right bad, but at least they leave behind what they don't eat. Convulsed with laughter, the raven nearly fell from the branch. Tailchaser grimaced. Yes, now, continued Skoggy, still bubbling with mirth, no matter who eats and who what's eaten, there's always some of the latter what's left behind. 'Tis the prime advantage of being born to the Krauken. Be we going to eat Master Tailchaser, Dad? Asked Crelly with innocent curiosity. In a flash, Skoggy had fluttered up the tree limb and, with his strong beak, administered a swift and painful tattoo on his fledgling skull. Thou interrupts thy batters again, and I nip off thy pin feathers and toss you out in yon tree for the mound cats to munch, you rockhead. You can't be eating everyone what passes by. He turned to Tailchaser. Now, my fine cat, course we both know that you be't so addle-pated as to go clambering back into this a-frightening mound. So, be that as it may, where ye going to? Perhaps I could tender a little advice. Freddy pondered for a moment, then smiled tightly up at the Krauka. Well, since we are speaking of this silly thing, and supposing I was in need of advice, what would you want in return? Now it was Skoggy's turn to show a look of cold amusement. You cats bain't quite so foolish as you be sung of. However, this one time, the hypothetical deed, which I'd be helping you with, would be reward itself. Though Blackbird knows not puffin likely of success. Be interested? Freddy nodded in acceptance. Good then. Well, let me tell you this. In days not long past, when first we saw yon dung heap rise up along our forest, were no tunnels that led out from it. The first one was a small one, and when they dug out the biggers, this one fell out of use. Methinks it still be unguarded, it having been fair hidden. The mound cats had not then what sway they do now. Here be how you may find it. When Skoggy had finished, he turned to his son. Now, you flip-winged clodpole, mark this well, in case some day you be called on to relate how you was the last what saw the brave Master Tailchaser alive. With another croaking laugh, the raven mounted into the air, Crelly wincing as he followed. Wait! Cried Freddy, and the two black fluffas stopped and hovered. If it doesn't matter to you who eats who, why are you helping me? A fair question, Master Cat, Skoggy called raucously. You see, as I figure it, at the rate they be going, those mound cats will have cleared the whole of Ratleaf by autumn time. Course, wherever they go, there'll be food for us Krauka, but I be getting right old. I prefers to fall out of the nest of a morning and find my breakfast a-waiting. So if you find luck, you'll be doing me a favor to bring your folk back to the forest. With a harsh caw of merriment, The ravens were gone. "Pounce quick! Please, listen to me." Roof Shadow walked gingerly across the prison cave and gave the kitten a not-too-gentle prod with one of her smoke-gray paws. Pouncequick let out a murmur of displeasure, but his eyes remained closed. He did not move. Roof Shadow was worried. Pouncequick had been sleeping or lying silent almost all the time since Scratchnail had brought her to the cave. The kitten had barely acknowledged her existence, raising his head only once, some time after she had arrived, to say, "Oh, good dancing, Roof Shadow," before lapsing back into his somnolent state. A few times since then he had replied to her insistent questions, but with little interest. In the corner of the cavern, eat-bugs sprawled like one dead. "Pounce, please talk to me. I don't know how much longer I'll be left here. They'll come back for me any time." She thought of Scratchnail, and fear made her fur crawl. The Claw-Guard chieftain had thrown her roughly into the prison pit with promises to come back and deal with her after he had made his report to the Lord of Vastner. That must have been days ago, although the dragging hours of darkness made it seem an even longer interval. He might return for her at any moment. "Pounce quick!" She tried again. "Can't you understand me? We're in terrible danger." She prodded him again. "Wake up!" Groaning, Pouncequick rolled slightly to one side, away from her demanding paw. "Oh, Roof Shadow, why don't you leave me alone? It's lovely here, and I don't want to..." He lapsed into silence for a moment, his beatific expression twisting into a frown. And I don't want to be where I was before," he finished sadly. Roof Shadow was exasperated and becoming more than a little panicky. "What do you mean? You're dreaming, Pounce." The youngling shook his head, the placid look returning to his face. "No, Roof Shadow, you don't understand. I'm with the White Cat. Everything is very peaceful. I'm learning things. Please, don't be angry with me. I wish you could see, Roof Shadow," he said fiercely, eyes still tight shut. "The light and the singing." Pouncequick fell silent again, and all the Phalus efforts could not make him speak more. The abandoned tunnel mouth was just where the raven had said it would be, hidden beneath a snow-flocked gorse bush at the rim of the woods. Tailchaser pawed suspiciously at the old tailings that ringed the entrance, but detected no recent presences. Ducking beneath the sheltering bush, he scrabbled away at the dirt and debris that had partially blocked the hole. When he had cleared a whiskers-wide opening, he poked his head through and sniffed again. The tunnel interior smelled only of old dirt and a few small animals who had briefly sheltered there. With only the faintest waver of his newfound resolution, he stepped inside. Above the white forest, the sun stood in the hour of smaller shadows. This tunnel was considerably drier than most of the others. Its air of disuse reassured him, and he made good time, padding boldly down into the depths. The glowing earth shone only fitfully here, but it was enough. Soon he began to pass cross tunnels, and from some of these wafted hot, moist air. He was approaching the active byways of Vastnir. He knew he would have to become more cautious. Since the sound was so low-pitched, so subtle, at first he did not notice that the silence of his abandoned spur tunnel had been breached. The subliminal pulse of the mound had been so familiar to him during his long imprisonment that he scarcely noticed its resumption. When it finally impinged on his thoughts, he realized that this time it seemed subtly different. That bothered him, and he could not say why. Then he understood. The noise was growing gradually louder, as if he were approaching the source. Every footfall seemed to be bringing him nearer to the agent of the dull, almost inaudible throbbing. When he had been a captive in the mound, it had always sounded the same, remote yet omnipresent, as if all of Vasnir had been producing a low, rumbling drone. Now the sound had begun to take on distinction, booming and hissing, definitely louder, growing more so with every step Fritty took. As he rounded a bend, the shaft sloped steeply downward, and a miasma of hot, wet air rolled up out of the darkness at the end of the tunnel. Tailchaser reared back, combing frantically at his face with a forepaw to clear his eyes of the clinging murk. Still determined, despite a fluttery feeling in his middle, Fritty slit his eyes against the billowing vapors and moved forward. As he legged cautiously down the incline, he passed beneath a door or opening of some kind, for suddenly the throbbing became an echoing roar, rattling and reverberating from the walls of a huge cavern that he could not see for the mist clouds that surrounded him. It's like Grumbleroar Falls, he thought. The strange subterranean breezes shifted direction and the vapors swirled away. In the half-light of the glowing soil, he could see the giant cavern above which he crouched, insect-like, on one of the shallow ledges that ringed the walls. Below, red-lit and foaming, surged an immense flood of water. The cavern had no floor, only the gigantic steaming river which passed endlessly through from one side to the other, filling the great domed cave with fogs and chaotic noise. Tailchaser felt the heat of the burning river beat up into his face as he peered cautiously over the ledge. The pounding force of the water as it crashed against the cavern walls and disappeared into the rock beneath him made Fritty feel suddenly dizzy, disoriented by the magnitude of the spectacle. As the river boomed its way down into the darkness beneath him, flaring comets of spray jetted up, to hang finally motionless far above his head, then plummet back to their source. Fritty backed away from the edge and huddled for a while near the tunnel mouth. Finally, the tumult began to sicken him. He pushed forward. Around the cavern near the opposite side, he could see several tunnels, coal black against the shadowed, crimson-brushed rock. Keeping tightly to the cavern wall, he headed toward these, walking carefully along the high, clean path above the surging river. It was slow going. From time to time, the wind would mysteriously change, and the swirling mists would descend, forcing him to stop and cling in place until he could see his way again. Inching his way around the perimeter of the monstrous chamber, he kept his eye firmly fixed to the trail before him. Occasionally he would see movement in the corner of his vision, but upon looking up find only leaping spray. Once he thought he saw two tiny figures scuttling along one of the pathways, crisscrossing the far wall, but as he squinted into the gloom, the mists heaved up again. When they had receded, all seemed as it had been. After an eternity of tortuous progress, he gained the far wall. Picking his way up the steep path, he reached the holes, farther above the roar and crash of the boiling river. The first tunnel that he reached itself fumed and steamed, and he hurried past, but the next opening carried a welcome hint of cooler air. Once he was inside, the temperature dropped rapidly. Pleased at this good sign, Fritty put distance between himself and the great cavern. With several tunnel bends behind him, the sound of the river had decreased to its earlier muted throbbing. He flopped to the floor of the shaft, glorying for a moment in the relative stillness and cool. After a few breaths, he applied his tongue to his soggy, matted coat.
You there!
The voice slashed through the shadowy tunnel. Fritty leaped to his feet, his heart pounding louder in his own ears than the raging water.
Stay! Hissed the voice. Stay and have words with Skin Wretch of the Tooth Guard.
And that's the end of the chapter. So, look at that, right on the button of 8 o'clock. So with that, we are going to wrap it up for the night and for the week, don't know why I've given all these cats voices that rip my larynx right out of my throat. Not good planning, Tad. Anyway, boy, I remember the old days making the mistake of doing a voice like that for a character that was on stage a lot back when I used to do theater. Oh my God, by the time you're in the second or third rehearsal, you're going, what was I thinking? I'm going to have to talk like this for 2 hours. But the director's going, don't change the voice. We just got used to the voice. The voice is good. And you're like, I can't talk. Anyway, problems of my youth. Weird problems of my youth. With that, I am going to close it up for the night. So here, as always, I bid you farewell. Auf Wiedersehen. Hasta la próxima. A bientôt. And all that other good stuff. And see you later, mate. We will reconvene next Sunday, 2 a.m. in the morning, my time, Pacific Daylight Time. And that is when we will read the next bit of Tailchaser. And then 23 hours from now, at 7 o'clock in the evening, Pacific Daylight Time, to continue the reading. And we still got a few more, how many chapters? We still got not much left. Not much left. So we've got another few days of reading, and then I have to start worrying about what we do next. Anyway, so all of you be good to yourselves, be good to your friends, family, neighbors, and everybody else who needs a hand. I bid you good night on behalf of Deb and myself and all of the creatures, human and semi-human and vague and uncategorizable, living here in Casa Beale Williams. And I hope you will return to join me, and I hope you will all have a lovely week. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay sane.